So I started studying Russian on January 1st of last year, and I told myself after a year and a half, I would go to Russia, stay there for a month, do a little bit of traveling, but most importantly, go hardcore on my Russian studies. Now, due to the coronavirus, my plans, like everyone else's, have been destroyed. So, in May, I had this idea that since I can't go to Russia, I really want to spend 1 week in my apartment doing essentially nothing but Russian, to have a Russian vacation in my apartment. So I became really excited with this idea. I announced that I was going to do it on my Twitter, on my YouTube, and as the time went on, my excitement grew and grew. Before the 40-hour, 7-day challenge began, which was on Monday of last week, I had decided to do this 30-day language challenge by Kingdom Languages, where you record yourself for a minute a day for 30 days. And I had it, so my last day was the Sunday before I started my 40-hour-a-week challenge. And it was really cool because it got me getting into the flow of speaking Russian every day, which would come in handy because I had 7 classes on italki during this vacation week. But the coolest thing that I discovered about doing this language challenge was that in the time that I've studied Russian so far, I essentially knew all of the vocabulary that I needed. I would say a very small percentage of the words that I used in that 30-day challenge I had to look up. I did get some kind of case help or do some things like that just to make sure that I was saying things fairly accurately. So a couple of days before that challenge began, well, the 40-hour-a-week challenge, I started to get a little bit, kind of a little unmotivated and even a little nervous. I don't know, I guess it was the pressure looming right there, because I knew that, I had to walk the walk. So Monday of last week it started. It's been a full week. And basically the idea was to live for a week like a Russian-speaking person, do the things that a Russian speaker would do, and I did just that. So I did podcasts, movies, series. Probably the most interesting thing that I did was I had a book. I used the Ollie Richard short story book, and I had a person that I know from Russia. He would read the text, and then I would model it, right? So the idea of that was not just to improve my pronunciation, but to kind of make the cases and the grammar a little more familiar, because keep in mind, up until this point, I have done 0 Russian grammar. So yeah, I did some vocab stuff. I messed around a little bit with Anki, but I've been learning vocabulary essentially just through what I read and what I hear. But I was working with a book that has like the 2,000 most common words in Russian, but in the infinitive form. So I thought this would be kind of good for me just to kind of touch up on some maybe holes, because I can see a word in a different conjugation form, but maybe I haven't seen it in the infinitive form. I got through almost 200 of those words, those sentences, and I really didn't see any forms of words that I didn't know in this almost year and a half of studying it. So the first day I did 7 hours The next 3 days were 6 hours, and I had made it so that I only had to do 5 hours the last 3 days. And, you know, I gotta say, it was super, super interesting and awesome to have a week where you could just dedicate it to your target language. And I'm an English teacher, so I'm essentially speaking English hours upon hours a day. And it was so nice to not even have to use my native language, right? And wow. Some of the things I thought were really interesting, were the fact that so I had 7 talking classes, and I actually had 7 classes in 6 days. I wanted to have it that last day as well, but it was actually hard to find a teacher that was working on Sunday. So I made an update on Twitter how everything went, at least in terms of my talking. So, you know, it was interesting. I've been taking classes on Italki for a while. I've recently experienced a certain level of success where I'm able to communicate. I am not using any kind of English in my classes. If I need a word, I'll try to act it out. And at the very most extreme, then I'll just write the word that I mean, but I won't say it. So my first class, I had with my, I guess you could say, my main teacher, or the main girl that I do my classes with, and that actually, it wasn't a good class. So I counted the first class not good. The second class was with a girl who I take classes with when I can. That class was alright. The third class was with a new guy, and that class went quite well. So that was a good class. The next day, on Thursday, I had a class with a new girl, and that went really well as well. So I think that those 2 classes with the people that I just took for the first time, you know, you're just getting to know each other and you talk about more basic things, whereas with people that you've already had class with, the conversation is well beyond that point. And of course I didn't just talk about the most basic things, but you know, it does start from there. And Friday I had like my advanced level class with a guy who I've had classes with a couple of times, and he just doesn't care that I'm learning Russian. He doesn't speak slower, which, you know, I like. So on Saturday, I had 2 classes with the new guy and the new girl, and those actually were good classes as well. It was funny with the new girl. It was kind of obvious that she was speaking to me like, you know, I was the student, not in the most natural way. Even like the new guy told me on the first class that he was impressed with my Russian because he was essentially speaking his normal pace and I was understanding. But when this girl was speaking to me in kind of her like slow teacher Russian, it was strange because my brain almost had to do more work to understand what she was saying, as opposed if she were just to speak to me naturally, because I do try to listen to natural Russian as much as possible. So those were 6 classes, all very interesting, all on the scope of performance. And this is something that I learned with Spanish, that, you know, some days I would have like amazing sessions, and the next day I would just like speak like garbage, you know. Let's say I live in Mexico, so you know, one day I would speak good, the next day is like, what's going on? You know, just even in my daily life. So yeah, it was really amazing doing a bit of reading. I wanted to I had this book that's like classic Russian literature, and I wanted just to kind of chop away at that for a half an hour or an hour, but I didn't get to that. I wanted to see how much of a struggle it would be, but many of those days I was listening to albums for my favorite Russian group, a group called Kino, and it was really great. I was discovering new music practically every day. I was discovering movies about important things in Russian or Soviet history. I even watched, on my last day, was the Soviet Sherlock Holmes, which they say is maybe even the best version, and it was really, really good. So, like I said, it was just so cool to wake up every day knowing that all I had to do was Russian, and it's really, all that I wanted to do. I spoke like 2 minutes of English in a WhatsApp voice message to a friend of mine. So that's like 2 or 3 minutes the whole week. I mean, that's pretty crazy considering that it would normally be hours and hours. I spoke a little bit of Spanish, but that's necessary. So, I tried to consume as much Russian content as I could. I did achieve the 40 hours. It's not to say that it's only Russian all the time, nonstop. I said I wanted to live a week like how a Russian person would live. So a Russian person can listen to some music in some different languages, sometimes watch some YouTube videos in English sometimes. So although I had very minimal non-Russian inputs, I wasn't being so kind of crazy about that because I knew how much Russian that I was doing. And just some takeaways. One thing that I know that I can apply to my just normal studies when I'm working on all that is that, although I knew this, this helped just kind of bring it to the forefront, is that, I would have the modeling sessions, the repeating from the book, and then maybe shortly after I would have a class, and I would have a space of time that I could choose to chill a bit or get a bit more Russian. And then, there's these spaces throughout all our day where we can do an extra 10-15 minutes of Russian, and it'll really add up. So that was cool. Another one of the takeaways that I really got from this experiment of sorts is that, Russian felt like it was a language that I communicated in, I listened to things in, I watched things in, that this past week was such a great way to just kind of normalize something. And even though I do a good amount of it during my normal week, just be surrounded by it so much of the day really started to make it feel like it was a part of you more than ever, because you didn't have any kind of distractions from English or any other language. So one thing that does happen is that laziness does kick in at some point. This happened to me like 3 days before the week was over, and maybe I had bouts during the day where I felt a little bit lazier than, the first day that I felt lazy, the second day that I felt lazy. And, it was weird because it wasn't even like laziness towards the language, but just laziness that you get in a normal day. Like I said, if you're living a Russian life, you're going to feel lazy. If you're living your life in whatever language, you're going to feel lazy. But it was never to the point where I couldn't do my things. And so I did do some passive listening. For the most part, it was only like right around 30 minutes a day. So the rest of the time, it was active studying. I did get like, a little over an hour of passive listening because on my last day, because I decided to go for a walk and things like that. And maybe in total that day it was like a little over an hour, maybe an hour and a half, right around there. But the rest of those days it was just about 30 minutes. And that was really cool because I wanted to make, I knew that challenge, I knew that passive listening was going to be a part of this challenge, because that's life. But, you know, since I have this whole week to dedicate to Russian, like the great majority of it needed to be like this active engagement with the language. And the real cool thing about on the last day when I was watching some things is that, you know, I felt that this language, although, you know, it almost felt like when I was watching it, that it was a foreign language of mine that was so good, like almost like if I were watching something in Spanish now. You know, my Spanish is advanced, my Russian is not even near that. You know, I would humbly say I'm still somewhere in the A, you know, level, whatever. So it just felt like so natural to me. I was picking out words so clearly. I was hearing the words so clearly, and maybe that was my gift, like the gift that the world just gave to me for having put in so much effort. Like it came full circle in that day. Now, of course, you know, that's going to vary from day to day, but that's just how it ended. So, super, super awesome challenge. You know, if anybody wants to do this challenge, I definitely recommend it. It was such an amazing experience. I was talking to Days of French and Swedish who did a similar thing, and I told him that, you know, I'm going to feel nostalgic about this, because, I mean, how often can you do something like this? And, you know, it was really cool to do it. So it's something that I highly, highly recommend if you ever get the chance. So I'm excited to have been able to share this with you guys, and I hope you liked it. Like I said, go ahead and do this language challenge if you can, because it's definitely worth it. It really has. It's been a really nice way to cap this year-and-a-half mark, which actually will be in essentially one day on July 1st. It will be my year-and-a-half points. So thank you for watching. Go ahead and subscribe and give it a like. So, you know, I want to be making a lot more normal language videos from now on. I know I had a long period of Russian. Well, I really needed to do all these things. So I think I can be a bit more diverse in my outputs, my content outputs. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.